You've heard of Dracula, the blood-drinking monster, but what if I told you he was real? And that the truth is far darker than the legend? Now listen to this story, the truth behind the legend. The winter wind howled through the Carpathian Mountains, sharp, cold, and merciless, like the men who ruled them. In a small fortress in Wallachia, a boy was born into the house of Draculesti, a line soaked in ambition, loyalty, and blood. His name was Vlad, son of Vlad Dracul, the dragon. His father bore the title Dracul, from the Latin Draco, meaning the dragon, earned as a member of the Order of the Dragon, a Christian brotherhood sworn to defend Europe from the Ottoman advance. For the young Vlad, the word dragon meant pride, power, and purpose, but it would also come to mean curse. Wallachia, a narrow strip between the mountains and the Danube, was a land forever caught between empires, crushed between the claws of Hungary to the west and the Ottoman Empire to the east. Its princes rarely died in bed. To rule it meant surviving betrayal, invasion, and shifting allegiances, and Vlad's father played both sides. In 1442, when the Ottomans demanded tribute, Vlad Dracul hesitated and paid the price. The Sultan Murad II summoned him to Constantinople, demanding proof of loyalty. The price: his two sons, Vlad and Radu, were taken as hostages. Vlad was just 11 years old. He would spend the next several years as a prisoner of the Ottoman court, a boy surrounded by silk and gold, yet chained by fear. He learned the Ottoman tongue, their customs, their strategies, and their cruelty. He saw impalement for the first time there, a punishment reserved for traitors and rebels. The method was slow, deliberate. The victim hoisted upon a sharpened stake, left to die over hours, sometimes days, while birds pecked at their flesh. It was meant to be a warning. To young Vlad, it became an education. While his younger brother Radu charmed the Ottoman courtiers, winning the favor of the young Prince Mehmed, who would one day become Mehmed the Conqueror, Vlad simmered in silence. He learned that fear was a weapon sharper than any sword, that mercy was weakness, that in a world of shifting loyalties, only terror could command obedience. Years later, released from his gilded captivity, Vlad returned to a homeland torn apart by war. His father had been betrayed and murdered, buried alive, some said, by Wallachian nobles who had turned against him. His elder brother, Mircea, was tortured and blinded before being buried. The same boy who once studied under the Ottomans now came home to corpses and ruin. Vlad swore vengeance, not just against those who killed his kin, but against the very concept of betrayal itself. He seized the throne briefly in 1448, but his hold was weak. Wallachia was no kingdom. It was a battlefield between Hungarian kings, Ottoman sultans, and treacherous boyars. Vlad fled into exile, moving like a ghost between the courts of Moldavia and Hungary, learning the art of survival through manipulation, silence, and timing. He watched, he waited, and when the moment came, he struck. By 1456, the winds had shifted. With the Hungarians distracted and the Ottomans stretched thin, Vlad returned to Wallachia, this time not as a boy, but as a hardened man. His enemies mocked him as Vlad the monk, a pretender. They did not mock him for long. He took back his father's throne by the sword, and immediately began reshaping the land through a reign of terror that would make even his captors shudder. He purged the boyars, the nobles who had betrayed his family, inviting them to a grand Easter feast in Targovist. As the wine flowed and laughter filled the hall, Vlad gave the order. The oldest and weakest were impaled on the spot. The rest were forced to march 50 miles under the burning sun to rebuild his fortress at Pompeii. Those who collapsed were executed. Few survived. When he rode through the streets, people bowed so low they could taste the dust. Vlad ruled through fear, but fear brought order. Bandits vanished from the roads. Merchants could travel safely with gold unguarded. Justice, though cruel, was swift and absolute. If a peasant was caught stealing, he died. If a noble plotted rebellion, he died. If an envoy insulted his rule, he died. It was said that a golden cup could be left in the center of Targovist, and not a single man would dare touch it. But his methods were not born from madness. They were born from memory. He had seen the Ottomans maintain control through terror. He had learned that fear made men obedient, and obedience kept him alive. Still, his reign was soaked in blood. His enemies multiplied, and so did his stakes. Foreign travelers reported seeing entire fields filled with the impaled, soldiers, nobles, thieves, and anyone who defied his will. He did not hide them. He displayed them like banners, a forest of the dead to warn the living. In one chilling account, when Ottoman envoys refused to remove their turbans before him, citing their custom, Vlad nailed the turbans to their skulls, telling them they could now keep them on forever. By 1460, Wallachia had become both fortress and graveyard. The stories of the Impaler prince spread like wildfire, exaggerated, twisted, but always with a kernel of truth. To his people, he was both protector and executioner, the hand that punished evil, but also one that drenched their land in red. To his enemies, he was a monster in human form. But to Vlad, it was simple. He ruled a land between wolves. Only a greater predator could keep the wolves at bay. And so, one night, as a full moon rose above the forests of Wallachia, Vlad stood upon a hill overlooking his domain. Below him, the impaled corpses of his enemies swayed in the wind, thousands of them, stretching as far as the torchlight reached. The smell of death hung heavy in the air, but he did not flinch. For him, it was not horror. It was justice. It was control. It was peace. And as the night deepened, the whispers began of a prince who drank blood, of a ruler who feared no man, of a man whose cruelty defied death itself. The Prince of Blood had become something else, something darker, something immortal. The year was 1462. Wallachia was a crucible of war. To the south, the Ottoman Empire loomed, led by Sultan Mehmed II, the same boy who had once shared bread with Vlad during their captivity, now the man who had conquered Constantinople. To the north, the Kingdom of Hungary watched, calculating, waiting. And in between stood Vlad III Dracula, the Prince of Wallachia, armed with nothing but his will, his army, and his forest of stakes. For years, he had defied both empires, balancing tribute and defiance like a man standing on a blade's edge. But now, the Ottomans demanded more than gold. They demanded obedience. Vlad's reply came not in words, but in blood. He launched a campaign of vengeance so savage that even his enemies spoke of it in whispers. He raided Ottoman garrisons across the Danube, torching villages, impaling soldiers, burning bridges, poisoning wells. Anything to keep the Sultan's armies from crossing into his land. No pity, no restraint. When the Sultan's envoys demanded his submission, Vlad responded by impaling 23,000 prisoners along the border, an unbroken forest of corpses stretching for miles. A message carved in human flesh. This is Wallachia. Enter if you dare. But Mehmed II did not frighten easily. In June of 1462, an army of over 100,000 Ottomans marched north, determined to crush the Impaler prince once and for all. Vlad's forces numbered barely 30,000. To stand and fight would be suicide. So he chose another path, a path of terror. As the Ottomans advanced through the night, Vlad struck. In what history remembers as the night attack at Targovist, he and his soldiers disguised themselves in Ottoman uniforms and slipped behind enemy lines. They set fire to tents, slaughtered guards, and rode straight for the Sultan's pavilion. The night became chaos, screams, smoke, and fire swallowing the camp. Vlad himself cut down hundreds before retreating into the dark. When dawn came, thousands of Ottoman soldiers lay dead, their own torches still burning in their hands. And when Mehmed advanced to the capital, he found it deserted. No soldiers, no resistance, only silence. Then, as the sun rose, the stench reached him. Before the city gates stood 20,000 impaled bodies, men, women, and children. It was said the Sultan turned pale at the sight, murmuring, "How can we fight a man who does such things to his own people?" He ordered his army to retreat. But terror is a double-edged sword. For every enemy Vlad drove away, a dozen conspirators rose within his own court. The nobles hated him. The peasants feared him. Even his allies began to wonder if he was mad. Desperate to survive, Vlad turned to the Hungarian king, Matthias Corvinus, a supposed friend. But Corvinus betrayed him. Instead of offering refuge, he imprisoned Vlad in Hungary, using forged letters claiming that Vlad intended to ally with the Turks. For 12 long years, the Impaler prince languished in a dungeon, chained and forgotten, a prisoner of politics. Outside, Europe spoke his name like a curse. Pamphlets spread through Germany and Italy, filled with lurid tales of his atrocities, how he roasted children, impaled merchants, drank the blood of his enemies. Some of it was true. Most of it was exaggeration. But truth no longer mattered. The myth was growing. To Western Europe, he became Dracula, the son of the dragon, the devil's own. To the Ottomans, he was a monster. To his people, a dark savior. When the tides of war shifted again, Hungary released him, desperate for any commander ruthless enough to stand against the Turks. In 1476, Vlad returned to Wallachia for one final campaign. Older, hardened, unbroken, he raised his banner once more, the Dragon's Cross, and reclaimed his throne. But his rule would last only months. Betrayal came again. While pursuing retreating Ottoman forces, Vlad and his small retinue were ambushed near Snagov. Accounts differ. Some say he was killed by his own men in confusion, others that assassins struck him down. His head was severed and sent to Mem II, preserved in honey and displayed on a stake in Constantinople. The body, they say, was buried near the Snagov monastery, though no grave has ever been found. And yet, even in death, Vlad would not rest. Stories spread that he had returned from the grave. Peasants whispered of riders seen under the moonlight, cloaked in black. Merchants swore they heard his voice in the wind, commanding unseen armies. In time, his name, Vlad Dracula, became tangled in legend. Centuries later, it would inspire Bram Stoker's immortal creation, Count Dracula, the vampire prince who feasted on the living. But beneath the legend of the monster was the truth of the man. Vlad ruled a small, fragile land caught between two empires. He had no armies to match them, no allies to trust. So he built his empire out of fear, and fear, unlike flesh, never dies. In Romania, some still honor him as a national defender, the prince who stood alone against the Ottoman tide. In the West, he remains the embodiment of cruelty, a symbol of the darkness lurking in power. But perhaps both are true. Perhaps the monster and the man were always one and the same. Because in the shadowed halls of history, Vlad the Impaler was never just a name. He was a warning that in the struggle to protect one's world, a man can become the very horror he fears. And so the dragon's son became the devil's myth. The hero became the curse. The prince of blood became Dracula. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also do well to check out other stories in this channel. Thank you.